Hi, my name is Lucie Middlemiss, and today I'm talking about some work we've been doing in the Netherlands, linking energy poverty to the energy transition agenda. Just to point out before I start that while I'm presenting this, I'm not the only author, and the group of authors that have been involved in this work are listed at the bottom. Mariella Veenstra has led on the academic paper that we're writing about out of this work, and Koen Schraver led on the white paper that I'll be talking about today. So I'll start by outlining the situation in the Netherlands. Then I'll tell you about an intervention that we staged with a white paper on energy poverty and energy transition in the Netherlands. And I'll finish by thinking about what we can learn from this in the Netherlands and beyond. So just to give you a bit of a background on what's going on in the Netherlands with energy poverty, until now, this agenda has largely been ignored at the national level. The Netherlands was one of the EU countries in which the story of we don't have energy poverty, we just have poverty, which we're dealing with through the welfare system, existed. However, there is a strong interest and focus on energy transition through the National Climate and Energy Plan, in which energy poverty is starting to be talked about, although mainly as a general poverty problem. I would say that two political movements are changing this and impacting on the energy poverty agenda in the nation. So first, there's a local regional move for stakeholders to act on energy poverty, and here they're acting on it in a very sort of inclusive way as an opportunity to address a range of different issues. So they're seeing it systemically. Governance is strongly decentralized in the Netherlands, so there's an opportunity for local and regional stakeholders to act on this because they're responsible for all these kinds of agendas. They also, through this action, are explicitly linking energy poverty and climate. The second political movement here that is changing things is the EU push on energy transition, which also requires consideration of energy poverty. And that marks the rise of the energy poverty agenda in the EU, which is linked, of course, to the work of lots of people here. For context here, the targets associated with carbon reduction will have a really big impact on energy poverty in households, as we know. In the Netherlands, a good example of this is the aim to transition from gas to electric for heat, which is an area in which people could be severely affected in a very detrimental way. What does the situation in terms of energy poverty look like in the Netherlands? Well, there are relatively low rates of incidence, among the lowest rates in the EU, various measurements on screen here from work by PBL. However, it does still exist as a problem. And also PBL identify a large number of households, which seem to be in an at-risk category. So households that are vulnerable to change. And when we think about the changes that will happen associated with the energy transition, we can see that's a big issue. I would also say that qualitative evidence shows that people are confronted with high energy bills and that as a result, they resort to coping strategies that we're very familiar with across the EU. For instance, only heating restricted areas of the house, turning on the heating only during a limited number of hours each day. So there are people living in too cold, drafty, mouldy, and unhealthy homes. Through our work, we've been staging an intervention on this through an event, a white paper, and then emerging policy at the national level. We saw a need for national policy to ensure budgets exist for this agenda, and also to ensure that inequalities are not created by some regions and municipalities being active and others not. So back in 2019, we organised an event through Engager, and Engager have been really critical in the whole process here. We then, some of the people that are involved in that event got together to co-author a white paper on this topic in the Netherlands. Again, these are Engager members. And by 2021, this has become an emerging policy in the Netherlands. So the Dutch government have realised that this is something they need to pay attention to, and they've commissioned TNO, the lead author of this white paper, to draft a new policy. So what do we recommend in the white paper? I think this is interesting both within and beyond the Netherlands because it's built on a systemic understanding of energy poverty, one which sees energy poverty as multifaceted and complex, linking the energy policy with policy in other domains like health, housing, environment. I would say this systemic understanding is widespread among experts and academics, And the white paper presented us really with an opportunity to translate this into concrete recommendations. The first recommendation is that we need a multi-indicator framework to capture the interplay between policy areas. And the image here is meant to represent this. This is clearly not a developed framework, but at the same time, it's the sorts of areas that we need to be looking at when we're measuring the impact of change on energy poor households. And you can see along the bottom the various challenges that energy poor households might face. A systemic understanding is really critical here because the idea of a multi-indicator framework is to allow the Netherlands to create a carbon reduction policy that also improves the lot of the energy poor. We also recommend monitoring of the lived experience as a solution to identifying the unintended consequences of policy, as well as the impact on the energy poor. In effect, a way of continuing to monitor the sort of systemic nature of this problem through lived experience. The second recommendation we make is to directly address energy poverty in national policy. Obviously, that's not happening at the moment in the Netherlands. And as a result, the local and regional initiatives lack this national framework to ensure funding and justify the action that they're undertaking. Also, given that carbon and reduction targets and policy is set at a national level, this really needs to be addressed at a national level, energy poverty does, to ensure that conversation happens across these domains. The third recommendation is that energy poverty is integrated into a range of policy areas. This is a really challenging and a bit of a classic recommendation. You know, we should avoid policy silos, but it's worth noting that this is already happening at local and regional levels in the Netherlands. So there's a possibility of the national government learning from that local, regional, systemic approach here. So what can we learn from this, both in the Netherlands and beyond? Well, the EU energy transition policy is clearly an opportunity to raise the energy poverty agenda in nations that aren't currently interested in this. And why is this an opportunity? Because I suppose there's such a clear need to incorporate energy poverty in energy transition measuring, monitoring, and action. The EU is obviously pushing on this, but I think that as soon as you start thinking about how energy transition policy might affect different bodies of people, here we are with our ways of understanding, measuring, and monitoring this problem, and we need to be engaging with that as a community of researchers and activists. I would say that this systemic perspective, which understands the problem as hugely interlinked with other social problems and social policy areas, it felt like a very good way in for us to talk to this reluctant nation about energy poverty, because I suppose it shows the opportunities for addressing multiple policy domains at once, but also creates this space in a way for talking about energy poverty that wasn't there in the Netherlands before. And as I said, the first national policy has now been drafted based on our white paper. So really, really proud that we've had that kind of an impact, and also that we'll have an input into that first national policy. That's all I've got time for today. I'm really happy to talk to people further if they want to, and I'm sure my co-authors would also be happy to be contacted.